Today, we're gonna be talking Iceland. I'm gonna be sharing my entire 4-day itinerary in South Coast Iceland. Let's get into it. So we arrived to Iceland at 5 a.m. in the morning, and our first stop was the Blue Lagoon. We actually planned it that way so we could catch the sunrise at the Blue Lagoon. Not only that, but the Blue Lagoon is actually on the way to Reykjavik, where we were gonna spend a night. So we booked our tickets to the Blue Lagoon in advance, which cost us about $75 US. And what that included was access to the Blue Lagoon, towel usage, free silica mask, which was kind of cool. So what it was is you would walk up to a little hut and there would be a guy behind these sliding windows all bundled up because it is cold in Iceland, especially in February. And this guy would scoop some silica into the palm of your hand. They tell you to rub it on your face and let it sit and keep it out of your hair. And it's supposed to do wonders for your skin. So their tickets also included one free drink at their walk-up bar. It was a little too early for alcohol, so we went with the green smoothies. So the facilities at the Blue Lagoon are nice. We've all seen the pictures on Instagram. The staff there is super friendly. I think it's something you definitely have to see when traveling to Iceland. It's kind of like going to Paris and not seeing the Eiffel Tower. With that said, the Blue Lagoon did lose a little bit of its charm to me when I found out that it was actually man-made and not a natural hot spring. Nonetheless, it's one of those must-dos when traveling to Iceland, but with that said, I don't know that I would do it again. I think maybe once was enough. So after the Blue Lagoon, it was time for lunch. We continued our drive to Reykjavik and stopped by a place called Icelandic Street Food. So this place specializes in all-you-can-eat bread bowls. They only had 3 to 4 items on their menu. One of them was the lamb soup, which I tried, and New had the shellfish soup. And the way it worked is once you were done with your soup, if you wanted more, you'd walk up to the counter, tell them to give you a refill, which they would do, and voila. After grabbing lunch, we were finally able to check into our hotel, which we did. Took a much needed nap. When we woke up, it was time for dinner, so we stopped by a place called Kruatai. Again, another place that is known for being pretty affordable. So the food there was actually pretty good. We tried the pad thai, a yam nu, and pad ped. Pretty generous portions, and we were pretty satisfied with our dinner. So we also made it a point to try out Icelandic hot dogs. I know it's a lot of food, but we were only there for a limited amount of time, so we had to squeeze it in. There is a really popular hot dog stand in Reykjavik that everybody goes to. We stood in line for a little bit, but it was freezing cold, and I don't care how good it is, I'm not gonna freeze my butt off for a hot dog. So as we were walking down the street, we stumbled onto another spot called the hot dog stand. There was nobody in line, so we're like, perfect, let's get one here. What made these hot dogs unique and different than the ones we're used to back home was the ketchup, mayo, those crispy fried onions that they put at the bottom of the hot dog, giving you a nice crunch when you bite into it. So that pretty much completed day one. On day two, we woke up pretty early to get our day going. We did travel to Iceland in February, which is considered their winter. What that means is that there is a limited daylight in their winter. So I took that into consideration when planning out our days. So what we would do is wake up before sunrise, have a little breakfast, and hit the road in order to get to our destination at sunrise, making the most out of our day. One thing I quickly discovered in Iceland was that it's pretty easy to navigate. There is one major road there that is called the One Highway, and it pretty much circles the entire island. So it did take us a little longer to get from point A to point B, mainly because we were traveling there in the winter, and the road conditions could get a little sketchy at times. But not only that, but Iceland is one of those places where you will find yourself just stopping alongside of the road to check out the scenery. We found ourselves doing that time after time again. So our first initial stop on day two was the geyser. So we spent about an hour there. So we watched the couple of geysers erupt a few times, got some cool shots, and from there drove to check out a waterfall called Gullfoss. So we didn't spend a lot of time at Gullfoss because it was super cold that day. Now we are from Michigan, so we are used to cold weather. And Iceland was not necessarily colder than Michigan. I think they had very similar weather, but what made it feel super cold was the high winds. Depending on where you were at, the winds could really pick up. So you could start your day, it was 40 degrees, sunny, you get to another spot, and bam, you're getting blown away by the wind. My wife is really petite, and I remember at one point she was trying to get into the car and could barely shut the door. Yeah, so the weather in Iceland is not super consistent. You get a little bit of everything, so please be prepared for that. After Gullfoss, we made our way to the Secret Lagoon. So we had a friend that traveled to Iceland before and put us on to the Secret Lagoon. Now the Secret Lagoon is a much different experience than the world famous Blue Lagoon. You can see why when you get there. It doesn't give you that luxurious feel, but instead a much more natural and organic type of experience. You can actually see the little geysers that are spewing hot water, and sometimes fenced up to keep you safe as you're swimming in the pool because the water behind the fence can get a little hot. Now this place was actually one of the highlights of our trip. The Secret Lagoon is actually the oldest geothermal pool in Iceland. It doesn't get the same kind of press that the Blue Lagoon does, but to me, it was much more of an authentic and organic experience. It doesn't have the luxurious facilities that the Blue Lagoon does, but because of that, you get access for a much lower price. So access to the Secret Lagoon is gonna cost you $30 in comparison to the Blue Lagoon, which was $75. You can use their towels for an additional $7, or you can actually purchase a towel for, I think it's an additional 20 bucks there. And that pretty much wrapped up the activities that we had planned for day 2. From there, we made our way to our hotel, which was called the Strakta Hotel. A pretty simple but nice boutique hotel. The cool thing about this place is you could sign up for a wake-up call in case the northern lights were out that time. We were there right at prime time for the northern lights, but unfortunately, no luck for us. We did not get to see the northern lights the entire time we were there. Another reason, go back to Iceland, I guess. So day 3, we checked out of our hotel and kept making our way to check out another waterfall. Again, it was super windy there. When we woke up, it wasn't too bad, but when we got to the location, the super high winds. Again, my wife is super small and petite, and there was a couple of times where she had to hold on to a chain fence or myself in order not to get blown away by the winds. So we spent about 30 to 40 minutes at the waterfall, got some shots, and from there got back into our car and made our way to the plane wreck. Now, the plane wreck was another one of those highlights for me. Once you arrive, there is a parking lot on the side of the road that you can park in, and there is a shuttle that hangs out in the parking lot and offers to drive you from the parking lot to the plane wreck itself. The drive there takes about 5 minutes and will cost you about $20 US. We skipped out on the shuttle. Instead, we decided to take our time, walk, and enjoy the scenery. The walk from the parking lot to the plane wreck takes about an hour. Once you get to the wreck, it is an amazing sight. So the story goes that in 1970s, a US Navy plane ran out of fuel and crashed here, and the remains have stayed there till this very day. Now, I love historical sites, but more so when they are left in their natural state like this. But what made the wreckage more special is where it was situated, right on the black sand beaches, just in the middle of a beautiful and vast area. Now, despite them telling you not to climb in and on top of the plane, that's the first thing that everybody does. You find people on top, taking pictures inside, just as we did. So the plane wreck was supposed to be it for our activities this day, but when we got back to the car, we noticed that we still had a good amount of daylight left. So we decided to keep driving west to the black sand beaches, and we're glad that we did. So we ended up spending the most amount of time at the black sand beach that we did pretty much anywhere else in Iceland. It was just a beautiful location. The sand there was amazing. We were making snow angels in it. The rock formations were awesome. We found ourselves just taking a lot of photos. Do be careful of the beach there. The current there can be very strong. It is not uncommon for the waves to suddenly come up and pull people into the water, so please be aware of that. And that pretty much wrapped up day 3. From there, we drove to our hotel, checked in, had dinner at the hotel, and called it a night. Day 4, so this was our last full day before heading back to Detroit, Michigan. So the first thing we did when we got up is checked out Skogafoss, which was located directly behind the hotel. It was strategically planned that way. We would stay there, and that would be the first thing that we do in the morning. Skogafoss is a really beautiful and massive waterfall. It has served as a backdrop for numerous films and TV shows, such as Game of Thrones. And that was pretty much supposed to be it for day 3. We were gonna take our time, drive back to the city, enjoy the food scene in Reykjavik a little bit, maybe stop by a bar, have a drink or two, and then call it a night. But as we were driving back, my wife and I started debating on whether or not we should experience Silfra. And what it is pretty much a crack in between 2 tectonic plates. And it's the only place in the world when you can swim in between 2 continents. The only issue with it was that we were visiting Iceland dead in the middle of winter, so we knew that that water was gonna be freezing cold. My wife's body's pretty fragile, so we were debating whether or not she was gonna be able to handle it. After much consideration, we decided to go through with it. So we made a turn towards Silfra and looked up a local company that could take us out on this excursion. So we landed on Arctic Adventures. I gave them a call in hopes that they had 2 open slots because this was very last minute. To our luck, they did. So we met them on site where they had all the necessary equipment to keep us safe. They got us geared up, and the next thing you know, we're snorkeling in what they consider the world's clearest water in a very obvious crack between 2 continents. I have a whole separate video on our experience at Silfra that I will link right here. It was super surreal, totally worth it, and super glad we did it. So after Silfra, we did make our way back to Reykjavik, where we checked into our hotel, had some food at a place called High Noodle, which specialized in ramen. Their tonkatsu there was fantastic, and they also had handmade gyozas that were absolutely delicious. Later that night, we decided to check out another spot called Horned Pizza, which was really good. Really loved the ambiance at Horned Pizza. It was kind of nice. It was laid back. You can, sit back, have dinner, have a couple of drinks, that kind of place. And that was pretty much it. The next day we were back on a plane to Detroit, Michigan. When we got back from Iceland, a friend of mine asked me if there was any culture shocks in Iceland. And for the most part, Iceland is pretty straightforward, especially if you're traveling from the US or other places in Europe. The one thing that took us off guard a little bit was the price point in Iceland. It is on the higher end. With that said, it is not crazy, but if you're accustomed traveling to South America or Southeast Asia, it's gonna be a little bit different. Let me give you a couple of examples. So for a cup of soup in Iceland, be prepared to pay anywhere from like $15 to $20. I had a beer at the bar and I paid approximately $15 for a single bottle of beer. Here's another example. So on one of those days we went grocery shopping so we could pack ourselves our own lunch. On that list was bread, cheese, lunch meat, chips, and a small case of water, and a total for that was approximately $50. One of the cool things about Iceland is we didn't have to exchange any money. Most places that we went to actually took US currency and credit cards, so no issues there. Lastly, my wife brought this up, is that when we rented a vehicle in Iceland and other places in Europe, most of the times you will get a manual car, which is not an issue because I do drive manual, but my wife did mention that if I wasn't around and she got a manual car, she'd be kind of screwed. So do be prepared for that. You could probably get an automatic car, but I think you would have to request it. If not, you will most likely get a manual car. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed the content of this video, please consider subscribing to the channel for everything and anything travel. Until the next one, guys, this is Cedric, and I'm out.